My stepkid said, "You're embarrassing us in front of our girls." I stopped booking trips, stopped giving pocket money, and left the vacation funds unclaimed. Their silence was loud. My name's Mark. I'm 50. 5 years ago, I married Rachel, a woman who still believed that broken things could be mended if you held them together long enough. She had 2 children, Ethan, 16, and Sophie, 14. Their father lived a few states away, the kind of man who made promises like postcards, colorful, empty, arriving long after they mattered. He would show up twice a year, sometimes 3 if guilt pressed hard enough, carrying boxes wrapped in expensive paper. He had the charm of a man who never stayed long enough to be tested. They adored him for that. When I entered their lives, I didn't want to replace him. I told Rachel that from the start. I didn't want to be another man trying to overwrite the past. I only wanted to help carry the weight she'd been holding alone. I wanted the kids to see that some men don't leave when things get uncomfortable. At first, I told myself it was working. I fixed Ethan's bike when he bent the rim on a curb. I drove Sophie to her swimming lessons when Rachel was too tired after work. I was the one sitting in the bleachers with a thermos of coffee when the weather turned cold. The one clapping even when Ethan missed every *T. The one who carried Sophie to bed when she fell asleep on the couch. None of it was spectacular. It was the quiet kind of work that builds trust, or so I thought. But from the very beginning, there was distance. An invisible wall that separated what I gave from what they could accept. They were polite, painfully so. They said thanks and good night and see you later. But their voices carried no warmth. Every word from them landed like an echo against glass. Close enough to hear, too far to touch. Rachel called it adjusting. She said time would fix it. Time, in her world, was a kind of miracle worker that healed wounds without effort. But time didn't soften anything. It just made the silence more familiar. They called me Mark. Never Dad. Not even stepdad. Just Mark. The man who drove the car, signed the checks, fixed the leaking faucet. My presence filled the space their father had left, but never the place he had held. It was worse on the days he called. Rachel's phone would light up, her voice would soften, and the kids would hover close by, listening for promises. They'd laugh at his jokes, hang up, and then drift back into silence as if remembering I was there ruined the illusion. I tried not to take it personally. I told myself I was doing this for Rachel, not for recognition. I was building something solid, a foundation of patience and consistency that might one day earn respect. But the longer I stayed, the clearer it became that respect wasn't part of the bargain. Rachel said I was imagining it, that they appreciated me in their own way. But appreciation doesn't hide behind closed doors. It doesn't mock you when you leave the room. Sometimes I'd come home late from work, and through the thin walls, I'd hear them. Ethan's voice low and dismissive, Sophie's laughter sharp and nervous. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew the tone. The kind kids use when they talk about a teacher they don't like but still have to obey. One night, I overheard Ethan say, "He's not my dad." Sophie laughed. Rachel told them to stop, but her voice carried no conviction. I sat in the dark of my car for 20 minutes before I went inside. I smiled at them as if nothing had happened. That was the kind of man I was. The kind who swallowed small humiliations and called it maturity. Still, I kept giving. That's what men like me do, we give, because it's easier than fighting for gratitude that never comes. When Ethan's phone broke, I bought him another. When Sophie wanted art supplies for a class she barely attended, I ordered the best ones. I didn't expect thanks anymore. I just wanted peace. But peace has a cost. It wears you down quietly, the way water hollows stone. Rachel noticed, though she pretended not to. She'd watch me from across the dinner table, me eating in silence, the kids on their phones, and she'd reach for my hand under the table. A small apology for a crime she'd never name. Her thumb would brush my knuckles, and I'd squeeze back, both of us pretending that gesture meant we were still in this together. The truth was we weren't. She had her loyalties, and they weren't with me. When Ethan failed his midterms, I stayed up late helping him study. When he passed the retakes, he hugged his mother, not me. When Sophie got sick, I spent nights by her bedside, refilling her water, checking her temperature. When she recovered, she thanked Rachel for everything. That's how it was. I did the work. She received the gratitude. I was the scaffolding that made their lives stable, invisible the moment the structure stood on its own. Every so often I'd think about walking away. Not out of anger, out of exhaustion. But Rachel had a way of pulling me back. She'd whisper that she loved me, that she couldn't do this without me. I believed her even when I shouldn't have. Then came the small betrayals, the kind that don't make headlines but still change everything. One night, Ethan asked Rachel for money for a school trip. She told him to ask me. He sighed, rolled his eyes and muttered, "Why? He's not even family." She didn't correct him. She just looked at me, waiting for me to handle it. And I did. I always did. Another time, Sophie needed a dress for a dance. We went shopping, Rachel and I, and when Sophie saw it, her first question wasn't, "Can I keep it?" but, "Did Dad pay for it?" When Rachel said no, that it was from me, Sophie's smile faltered. She said thank you, but her tone carried something bitter, as if accepting anything from me was a kind of betrayal. That night, I sat alone in the living room long after they went to bed. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. The walls held too much unspoken history, too many things we pretended not to hear. I thought about my own father then, a man who believed that patience was the same thing as love. I used to think he was weak. Now I understood him too well. Years have a way of folding in on themselves. What starts as effort becomes habit, and habit becomes resignation. I stopped expecting warmth. I learned to measure my days in tasks completed, bills paid, problems solved. I learned to find meaning in usefulness. But usefulness isn't love. It's a contract, and every contract has an expiration date. I didn't know it yet, but mine was already written. The first cracks showed in small ways. A glance that lingered too long on Rachel's face when I spoke. A sigh from Ethan when I tried to join their conversations. Sophie turning her body away when I sat too close on the couch. I told myself it was adolescence, hormones, growing pains. But deep down, I knew. They weren't waiting for me to prove myself. They were waiting for me to give up. Rachel, too, changed. She began defending them automatically, even when she didn't believe her own words. "They're just kids," she'd say. "You take things too seriously." Maybe she was right. Maybe I did. But that's what happens when you're the only adult who never gets to be heard. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the hallway mirror. The gray at my temples, the lines around my mouth, and think, this is what loving the wrong family does to a man. You fade at the edges. You become the quiet thing that keeps the world spinning for everyone else. I kept waiting for a sign that it was worth it. Some small moment. A thank you, a shared joke, a look of real connection. It never came. 5 years. That's how long I stayed believing that consistency could turn indifference into love. 5 years of steady work, of swallowing pride, of holding a house together that didn't want me in it. By the time the turning point arrived, I had already stopped hoping. I just hadn't stopped giving. And maybe that's why the betrayal, when it came, didn't sound like shouting. It sounded like the quiet truth finally spoken aloud. The breaking point never arrives with noise. It comes disguised as an ordinary evening, a small failure in a string of small failures that together make a man see himself from the outside. It was late spring. The house smelled of laundry and detergent, and the air carried that soft exhaustion that fills a home after everyone has gone quiet. Rachel was upstairs helping Sophie pack for a school retreat. Ethan was in the garage, tinkering with his bike chain, the one I had replaced twice that year. I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by the clutter of half-lived lives. Screwdrivers, homework sheets, a glass of cold coffee. I remember looking at the calendar on the wall. Circles, arrows, little notes in Rachel's handwriting. Beach weekend, booked, Ethan's tournament, Sophie's art show. All the evidence of a family trying to resemble one. I had planned that beach weekend months ago. Rented the house, paid the deposit, mapped the drive. It was supposed to be a reset, a few days where maybe sunlight could do what words had failed to. While I scrolled through my emails, I heard Ethan talking to his sister. Their voices were low but not low enough. "Do we really have to go?" he said. "It's just awkward with him there." Sophie giggled softly, like agreement was a private language. "Mom says he's trying." Ethan's reply was a whisper that still cut clean through the air. "He tries too hard." It wasn't cruelty. It was dismissal, something colder than hate. I sat still, listening the way one listens for a sound already known. Confirmation, not surprise. Later, Rachel came down, tired, smiling the way people do when they want to pretend the day went well. She kissed my shoulder, asked if I had everything ready for the trip. I said yes. But inside, something had already shifted. That night, when everyone was asleep, I stood at the window. The street was empty, the lamplight trembling across the hood of my car. The reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered. Not just tired, but used up. I thought about all the years behind me, the steady giving, the long patience. And I realized that I had mistaken persistence for purpose. Love had become a routine, and I had become invisible inside it. The next morning, I told Rachel I needed a day alone before the trip. I drove without destination, down toward the coast, past small towns with diners and gas stations that smelled of salt and gasoline. The sky was the color of unpolished metal. I stopped at a rest area overlooking the sea. Wind pressed against the windows, carrying the dull roar of waves. I sat there for hours trying to name what I was feeling. It wasn't anger. Anger still believes someone might listen. This was quieter. Felt like the end of a sentence. When I finally went home, nothing had changed on the surface. The kids were arguing about packing. Rachel was searching for sunscreen. The life I had built still moved, indifferent to whether I moved with it. That night, as I loaded the trunk, Ethan passed by holding his board bag. He looked at me briefly, then at the car and said, "Mom said maybe you don't have to drive. Dad might pick us up instead." He said it lightly, without malice, the way you mention weather. But the words landed like a verdict. I nodded. "If that's what she wants." He shrugged and walked off. The conversation lasted 10 seconds, but it rearranged everything inside me. I went inside, sat on the edge of the bed. Rachel came in a few minutes later, already knowing. "They didn't mean anything by it," she said. "They're just excited. You know how kids are." I wanted to ask her if she had corrected him, if she had said, "He's your stepfather, he's part of this family." But I didn't. I could already read the answer in her face. The soft guilt, the way her eyes avoided mine. We left the suitcases by the door that night. I didn't cancel the trip. I simply stopped insisting on being included. The next morning they left without me. I watched from the porch as the car pulled away, their laughter faint through the rolled-up windows. When the sound disappeared, the silence felt like something living, breathing, stretching across the walls of the house. For the first time, I didn't chase after it. The following days passed like a dream played at half speed. Cleaned, cooked, worked. The routine stayed, stripped of witnesses. In the evenings, I walked the neighborhood. I noticed the small things that family noise used to drown out. The hum of insects, the smell of rain on asphalt, the way dusk softened every hard edge. The absence of them was heavy, yes, but it was also honest. Sometimes honesty hurts less than pretense. They called once from the beach. Rachel's voice was bright, practiced. The kids mumbled greetings in the background. I told them to have a good time. I meant it. When the call ended, the silence didn't feel like punishment anymore. Felt like space. The first real air I'd breathed in years. I began to write lists again. Things I had stopped thinking about. The workshop I never finished, the fishing rod still wrapped in plastic, the book I had wanted to read for years. They weren't ambitions, just reminders that there was still a person beneath the husband and the provider. By the time they returned, I had changed in small, invisible ways. I greeted them calmly, helped unload the car, listened to their stories about waves and sand and perfect weather. They noticed nothing. That was fine. My transformation wasn't meant to be seen. That night, Rachel asked if I was upset she'd gone without me. I told her no. It was the truth. Because the distance I'd been fearing had already existed long before that trip. The beach only revealed it. What she called a misunderstanding, I now saw as clarity. Love, when it becomes one-sided, doesn't end in explosions. It erodes. It turns into something gentle but final, understanding. I still fix the leaking faucet. I still keep the lights on. But something in me no longer bends. I no longer mistake silence for peace or tolerance for love. That was the real turning point. Not a fight, not a betrayal, just the quiet decision to stop proving my worth in a house that never asked for it. They came home sunburned and tired, sand still clinging to their bags. The smell of salt and sunscreen filled the hall. Rachel's laughter echoed for a moment, then faded when she saw me standing there. I smiled, offered to help with the luggage. She hesitated before handing me anything, as if the gesture itself might admit something had gone wrong. The kids brushed past, talking over one another about the waves, the cafe on the boardwalk, the dolphins they swore they saw at dusk. They spoke the way people do after a good dream, half afraid it will dissolve if they stop. I listened, nodding, and when they disappeared upstairs, the house fell into the same quiet that had lived here long before the trip. That night, I found the receipts Rachel had left on the counter: gas, groceries, small souvenirs. Nothing extravagant. But the numbers told their own story. She had done her best to cover what I once handled automatically. Seeing that made something inside me unclench. For years I had believed they could not manage without me. Now I saw that belief for what it was: control dressed as care. At dinner the next evening, Ethan spoke first. "It was weird without you," he said, not looking up from his plate. The words were flat, more observation than apology. Sophie added, "Mom had to drive the whole way. She hates driving." Rachel said nothing. She kept her eyes on her fork, turning peas into a slow circle. I told them the trip looked nice from the pictures Rachel had sent. That was all. The conversation drifted to other things. When it ended, I cleared the table, rinsed the dishes, and went to the garage. I stayed there for hours, reorganizing shelves that didn't need reorganizing, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. In that stillness, I understood something new. Love had been a rhythm: give, wait, hope, repeat. And somewhere along the line, I had mistaken that rhythm for heartbeat. The realization didn't break me. It steadied me. The following week unfolded like slow rain. I went to work, came home, fixed what needed fixing. The family machine kept moving, only with less noise. Rachel tried to close the gap a few times. Small touches on my arm, questions about my day. I answered kindly but without the old urgency to be seen. The distance between us wasn't punishment anymore. It was protection. One afternoon, Ethan found me in the yard tightening a loose fence post. He stood there, awkward, hands buried in his pockets. "Mom says you're quiet lately," he said. "I guess I ran out of words," I replied. He nodded, looked at the grass, then back at me. The trip wasn't the same. It was fine, but he didn't finish. He didn't have to. We both understood that sometimes absence speaks louder than presence. He helped me hammer the last nail and went inside. That small moment didn't change everything, but it showed a crack in the wall I thought was permanent. Not an apology, just awareness, fragile but real. At night, Rachel and I shared the same bed, but sleep came to us from different worlds. I would lie awake listening to her breathe, thinking about how love, if neglected long enough, becomes a kind of ghost. You can feel its weight without seeing its face. I didn't resent her anymore. I had simply stopped needing her to choose me. Sophie came down one morning holding a drawing, a sketch of the ocean, rough but honest. "For you," she said. "You missed it." The lines were messy, but the gesture was clean. I pinned it to the fridge without a word. That picture stayed there for weeks, then months, outlasting our conversations. Slowly, I began to rebuild my days around silence. I took walks before sunrise, when the streets were still empty and forgiving. I cooked for myself smaller portions, lighter meals. I started fixing an old boat motor I had found on a neighbor's curb, not because I needed it, but because it reminded me that some things, when tended patiently, can work again. Rachel noticed the change but didn't name it. Once she asked if I was happy. I told her happiness wasn't the goal, peace was. She nodded, unsure whether that was good or bad news. The kids adjusted too. Ethan began washing his own clothes. Sophie learned how to change a tire. The house slowly stopped leaning on me. Watching them learn these small independences hurt in a strange, satisfying way. Maybe that was love after all. Letting people grow even when it grows them away from you. Months passed. Seasons folded over each other. Our life didn't collapse. It settled. There were dinners, birthdays, a few quiet holidays. But the old rhythm, the expectation that I would fill every silence, fix every crack, never returned. They stopped asking and I stopped offering. In its place came a calm I had never known before. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about that canceled beach trip and realize it had never been about sand or sea. It had been about illusion, the hope that a change of scenery could rewrite the story. But the story had already been written. I just hadn't learned to read it. Now I do. I see the difference between giving and surrendering, between patience and silence. I see that love, to survive, needs reciprocity, not sacrifice alone. And with that understanding came a gentler kind of detachment. Not bitterness, but clarity. I could still care for them, still wish them well, but without losing myself in the process. The family remains, reshaped. Rachel and I share a quiet companionship, the kind built not on passion but on endurance. Ethan and Sophie treat me with cautious respect. We coexist in the same house, each learning what it means to live honestly with the truth. I used to think love was about holding on. Now I know it's about knowing when to loosen your grip. That realization didn't come with fireworks. It came with the sound of the dishwasher finishing its cycle, the steady hum of a life continuing. And for the first time in years, that sound was enough. The house grew quieter as months folded into another year. Not empty, just different. The noise that once meant tension now sounded like ordinary life. The slam of a door, the muffled beat of music from Sophie's room, Ethan's footsteps leaving for work. I existed among them the way the foundations exist beneath a house, unseen but steady. And for once, that was enough. Rachel and I still shared coffee in the mornings. She would ask about work, I would ask about her garden, both of us choosing small talk over postmortems. There was no need to reopen the old wounds. We had learned how to breathe around them. Sometimes, though, I caught her watching me as if she wanted to apologize for something she couldn't name. When our eyes met, she would smile, soft, weary, and that was our truce. The kids changed faster than either of us expected. Ethan finished school, started working at a repair shop, and came home with grease under his fingernails and stories about engines that refused to cooperate. Sophie turned 18, quieter, more self-contained. I watched them navigate the small disappointments that come with growing up and felt the strange pride of distance. I had not failed them by stepping back. I had simply allowed life to take its turn. One afternoon in early autumn, Ethan asked if he could borrow my old toolbox. He said he wanted to fix something for a friend. When he brought it back, the sockets were cleaned and oiled, arranged better than before. Didn't want to return it messy, he said. It was the closest he had ever come to saying thank you. I nodded, understanding that gratitude sometimes hides behind simple order. Sophie came home one evening with a sketchbook full of charcoal drawings. She laid it on the table, open to a page of a man standing on a pier, his back turned toward the sea. The caption underneath read, "Some distances protect more than they divide." I asked if she had written it. She shrugged, embarrassed. "It just felt true," she said. I told her it was. Rachel found the drawing later and framed it. It hangs in the hallway now, facing the front door. As winter settled, I began repairing the small boat engine I had dragged home months before. The work became a ritual. Evenings in the garage, radio low, the smell of oil and salt in the air. Each bolt turned was a thought put in order. Each spark of the wrench was a reminder that motion still existed inside stillness. When spring came, I took the boat to the lake alone. The motor coughed twice before catching a rough, stubborn sound that made me smile. I pushed away from the dock and drifted into the open water. The surface was glass. The horizon looked infinite. For the first time in years, I didn't think about what anyone expected of me. I thought only about the rhythm of the water against the hull, steady, forgiving. That evening, back home, Rachel asked where I had gone. I told her the lake. She nodded, waiting. Did you find what you were looking for? She asked. I said, maybe I stopped looking. She smiled, a real one this time, the kind that comes from surrender rather than hope. The kids call occasionally now. They ask for advice, not help. Ethan wants to buy his own car. Sophie talks about applying to an art school. Their voices are polite, hesitant, but they carry something new, respect, maybe, or understanding. I don't press for more. I let the pauses stand. I've learned that love doesn't disappear. It just changes its weight. What once felt like a burden now feels like quiet knowledge. I gave what I could, and when it was no longer wanted, I learned how to keep the rest for myself. Sometimes I still walk through the house at night, touching the walls, listening to the creak of wood settling. The echoes no longer sting. They sound like proof that we lived here, that we tried, that the attempt itself was worth something. I keep a small journal on the nightstand. In it I write fragments, nothing polished, just traces of thought. A family isn't built by blood or marriage. It's built by the moments we stay after everyone else has left.